After the general election and Sissy's defeat there, McGovern by this time was clearly going to be the nominee of the Democratic Party. We were concerned that he didn't have much of a chance with a traditional campaign and thought that something different that would, again, invigorate the youth vote, the women vote, the minority vote. We just felt she brought something to a presidential campaign as a VP candidate. She was from Texas, a key state, so it made sense to us that she would be a viable candidate. I will candidly say it didn't make much sense to very many other people. We were just, by that time, there were just three of us, and we decided to go to Miami Beach, Florida, and try to get her nominated. So just essentially on her dad's credit cards and a little bit of money that we were able to raise, we head off to Miami Beach in my 1968 Dodge van. Emily Farenthold called it a social worker green, and we found ourselves in Miami Beach, Florida, in a place called Flamingo Park, which was set aside as a organizing point or a place for all of the youth to gather. Funny story, when we first got there, we had driven across country in this unair-conditioned van. They said, well, everybody's down at the swimming pool. So we go down to this public swimming pool and we go in because it sounded like that would be a good way to cool off. And when we go in, here are all these kids swimming in the pool naked and all these cameras around. So we had a crisis moment. We decided that it probably wouldn't be good PR for a VP candidate's campaign to be seen on national television swimming naked, so we declined the opportunity to cool off. But it was a very, very, very informal thing. We didn't have money for a hotel room at that point, so we took 2 large camping tents and a bunch of posters that we took magic markers and wrote. It had Sissy, or it said Farenthold, and underneath we'd say for VP. And that was her campaign. The reception was initially fairly standoffish. Nobody had heard of her, but when we would begin to explain the things, what really gave us a shot in the arm was McGovern announced at the last, right before the convention opened, that he was going to name a fellow by the name of Thomas Eagleton as his VP. The fact that nobody really knew Eagleton or couldn't figure out what he would bring to the ticket gave us the opportunity to say, wait a minute, we've got a Texan, a Catholic, a female, a Southern woman who has charisma. She could bring definite assets, and everybody in the country knew something of her because of her race against Briscoe. So people said, that's interesting. And we began to make inroads. We met some famous feminists, early feminists, Gloria Steinem, Bella Abzug, Charmaine Greer, that we began to build some momentum. Had it not been for the Eagleton nomination, I don't know that it would have happened. I think it was just sort of a confluence of events that sort of struck gold, you might say. Eventually, we settled on an argument: vote for Farenthold on your first ballot as a protest. You're then released to vote your conscience thereafter, but on the first ballot, as a endorsement of the McGovern rules, vote for Farenthold as a protest to the dictates of a selected VP candidate that nobody knows. And that kind of helped us. Eventually we had enough signatures that we could go to the party apparatus to file for a position on the VP slate. So we go in and we said, well, where would we file this? Nobody seemed to know. We were told, that sounds like the rules. Go to the rules committee. So the rules committee was always a standing committee. And so we went to the rules committee, said we've got, I'm going to say we had 200 or 300 petition signatures. We'd like to get a position on the slate for VP. They scratched their heads and sort of looked at us like they didn't know what to do with us. And eventually they accepted us, accepted the petition. So we were standing there. Myself and Larry Patty took the petitions in, and we said, well, shouldn't we get a receipt? I mean, there wasn't any form. They didn't have a form or anything. They didn't know what to do with it. And this is the official receipt we were given for the petition to place the name of Francis T. Farenthold into nomination as Vice President of the United States on the Democratic Party by the 1972 Democratic Convention. I think we were a first for everybody there. They didn't know how to deal with it. But Sissy was placed, her name was placed into nomination. With that nomination, we got floor credentials, and so they would only give us 2 floor passes. So there were 3 of us, so we would alternate the floor pass. We were on the floor strong-arming people still to vote for Sissy on that first ballot. In the course of that, we butted heads a couple of times, met Gary Hart, who was the campaign chairman, and he was always pretty hostile toward us. I met him at a Democratic convention in '84, I guess, and went up to him and introduced myself and told him I was one of his delegates, and he was very glad to see me, and we were having a great conversation. I said, by the way, I was one of those Baylor Brain Trust guys that nominated Farenthold in '72. His face immediately changed. You could tell he was still pissed off about it. But anyway, it was a great experience.